November 1963. One man owned 1.8 billion pounds of vegetable oil. Or so he claimed. That was more oil than existed in all of America. Banks had lent him $175 million against this oil. Wall Street had bet billions on his commodity trades. The U.S. government had signed contracts with him. American Express had staked its reputation vouching for him. But here's the thing nobody checked. The massive storage tanks in Bayonne, New Jersey were almost empty. They were filled with seawater. Just a thin layer of oil floated on top. The greatest commodity fraud in American history was about to explode. This is the story of Tino de Angelis. The man who nearly destroyed American Express with salad oil. Anthony Tino de Angelis understood one simple law of physics. Oil floats on water. That's it. That's the whole con. But the execution was brilliant. Picture massive storage tanks in Bayonne, New Jersey. Each tank stood 6 stories tall. Each could hold millions of pounds of vegetable oil. De Angelis filled them with seawater instead. Cheap. Plentiful. Free from the harbor. Then he pumped just enough real soybean oil on top. Maybe 2 feet of oil floating on 60 feet of water. From above, the tanks looked completely full of oil. Here's how the inspections worked. Bank auditors would arrive at the Allied crude vegetable oil facility. They needed to verify the oil existed before approving loans. They would climb the tanks with measuring sticks. They would dip from the top hatch. The stick came up coated in golden vegetable oil. Every single time. The inspectors wrote their reports, tanks full of oil. The banks released millions in loans. Nobody ever checked the bottom of the tanks. Why would they? Oil floats. Everyone knows that. De Angelis exploited the second loophole, warehouse receipts. These were official documents certifying oil existed in specific tanks. Banks accepted them as collateral for massive loans. Here's the genius part. De Angelis issued multiple receipts for the same tank. One tank of phantom oil-backed loans at 5 different banks. The banks never cross-checked with each other. He used the same seawater over and over again. He even connected tanks with hidden pipes underground. During inspections, he pumped real oil between tanks rapidly. Inspectors checking tank 7 would see oil. An hour later, that same oil was in tank 12. One batch of real oil certified a dozen empty tanks. The paperwork showed 1.8 billion pounds of soybean oil. The reality was maybe 100 million pounds maximum. The rest was New Jersey harbor water. But the documents were perfect. American Express ran the warehouses and issued official receipts. If American Express vouched for it, banks believed it. The company's reputation was De Angelis's greatest weapon. He understood something crucial about finance. Nobody actually verifies anything. They verify the verification. Banks didn't check the oil. They checked American Express's paperwork. American Express didn't check every tank. They checked their own inspection log. Everyone trusted the system. De Angelis was the system. Tino de Angelis started in a Bronx butcher shop. His father sold meat during the Depression. Young Tino learned that food was power. Whoever controlled the supply controlled the price. By 1955, he'd moved beyond meat. He founded Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Company in New Jersey. His timing was perfect. America was shipping vegetable oil overseas under government food programs. The government needed suppliers for international aid shipments. De Angelis won the contract. Suddenly, he wasn't just a businessman. He was a patriot feeding hungry nations. The U.S. government became his biggest customer. They paid top dollar. They asked few questions. De Angelis began cornering the soybean oil futures market. He bought massive contracts on the Chicago Board of Trade. The price of soybean oil started rising. He bought more. The price rose higher. Traders noticed someone was accumulating a monster position. That someone was Tino. By 1962, he controlled nearly the entire global soybean oil market. If you wanted vegetable oil anywhere in the world, you paid his price. His wealth exploded. He bought mansions in New Jersey. He wore custom Italian suits worth thousands of dollars. He drove a fleet of Cadillacs. His office had marble floors and crystal chandeliers. He threw lavish parties for bankers and politicians. Everyone wanted access to the salad oil king. Banks lined up to loan him money. Chase Manhattan loaned him tens of millions. Bank of America competed for his business. Continental Illinois wanted a piece of the action. The collateral seemed rock solid: warehouse receipts from American Express. American Express operated his storage facilities in Bayonne. They inspected the tanks. They issued the official receipts. Their corporate seal guaranteed the oil existed. If American Express said the oil was there, it was there. The banks never questioned it. Angelis used this trust like a printing press. He'd take a loan from Chase using warehouse receipts. Then he'd use the same receipts at Continental Illinois. Then again at Bank of America. The same phantom oil backed hundreds of millions in loans. He was creating money from seawater. And everyone celebrated his success. Wall Street saw him as a visionary commodity trader. The government saw him as a reliable contractor. The bank saw him as a cash cow. His employees saw him as a genius. He controlled the price of cooking oil across America. Restaurants paid what Tino demanded. Food manufacturers bought at his rates. He could move global markets with a single phone call. At his peak in 1963, his paper wealth exceeded $200 million. That's nearly $2 billion in today's money. Not bad for a Bronx butcher's son. He lived like American royalty. His summer home had indoor pools and tennis courts. He entertained senators and congressmen. He donated to political campaigns. He was building a dynasty. His sons worked in the family business. His future seemed absolutely limitless. The hustle had become legitimate. Or at least it looked that way. American Express trusted him completely. They never suspected the tanks were mostly water. Why would they? He'd been a client for years. Every inspection had passed. Every warehouse receipt had been honored. The system worked perfectly. Angelis understood that confidence is contagious. If one major bank trusts you, others follow. If American Express vouches for you, everyone believes. He'd built a cathedral of trust on a foundation of seawater. And for years, nobody looked down. They only looked at his mansions, his contracts, his success. In 1963, Tino Angelis was too big to fail. He controlled billions in commodities. He employed hundreds of workers. He had government contracts worth millions. The financial system had bet its reputation on him. Everyone was invested in his success. Everyone needed him to be legitimate. So nobody asked the simple question: what's actually in those tanks? November 1963. American Express finally decided to conduct a full audit. Not a routine inspection. A complete physical inventory of every single tank. Something had triggered suspicion. The numbers weren't adding up anymore. Angelis claimed to own more oil than physically existed. American Express sent a team to Bayonne. They brought drilling equipment this time. Not just measuring sticks. They were going to check from the bottom up. November 18, 1963. The auditors arrived at tank 6001. They drilled a small hole near the bottom. Water poured out. Not oil. Seawater. They moved to tank 6002. Same result. Water. They checked tank 6003. Water again. Tank after tank revealed the same horrifying truth. The facility was a fraud. The auditors worked through the night. Out of hundreds of tanks, only a handful contained real oil. The rest were seawater with a thin oil layer on top. 1.8 billion pounds of certified vegetable oil didn't exist. It had never existed. American Express had issued warehouse receipts for seawater. The company's reputation was built on those receipts. Now they were worthless paper. November 19. American Express executives held an emergency meeting in New York. The numbers were catastrophic. Banks had loaned $175 million based on their warehouse receipts. That's over $1.7 billion in today's money. American Express was legally liable for those receipts. The company faced total annihilation. Their stock was about to collapse. They needed to notify the banks immediately. November 20th. The phone calls began. Chase Manhattan received the news first. Their loans were backed by phantom oil. Bank of America was next. Continental Illinois followed. 51 banks had extended credit to Angelis. Every single loan was collateralized by seawater. Panic spread through Wall Street like wildfire. Allied Crude Vegetable Oil Company declared bankruptcy that afternoon. $175 million in loans defaulted instantly. 2 brokerage firms collapsed immediately. Williston and Bean went under. Ira Haupt and Company followed. They'd financed Angelis's commodity trade. Those trades were now worthless. The New York Stock Exchange faced its first closure since 1914. American Express stock went into freefall. It dropped from $60 to $30 in a single day. 50% of the company's value vanished. Investors lost billions. The commodities market froze. Nobody knew who else had been conned. Nobody knew which warehouse receipts were real. The entire system of commodity financing seized up. Banks stopped lending against warehouse receipts entirely. Legitimate oil traders couldn't get financing. The soybean oil market crashed. Futures contracts became worthless overnight. De Angelis's offices in New Jersey were raided. FBI agents seized documents by the truckload. They found the hidden pipes connecting the tanks. They found the duplicate warehouse receipts. They found evidence of systematic fraud dating back years. De Angelis fled to his mansion. Federal marshals arrested him on November 21. He was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and wire fraud. The evidence against him filled entire warehouses. November 22, 1963. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. The nation went into mourning. The salad oil scandal disappeared from the front pages. But on Wall Street, the damage was done. American Express faced over $150 million in claims. The company's survival hung by a thread. Insurance companies refused to cover the losses. Lawsuits piled up by the hundreds. Banks demanded immediate payment for the fraudulent receipt. De Angelis's empire had evaporated in 72 hours. From billionaire to inmate in 3 days. The tanks in Bayonne still stood there. Silent. Full of seawater. Monuments to the greatest commodity fraud in American history. American Express was dying. The company faced $150 million in claims from the fraudulent warehouse receipts. That exceeded its entire net worth. Bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Wall Street had written off the company as dead. But one investor saw opportunity in the catastrophe. Warren Buffett. He was still relatively unknown in 1963. But he understood something others missed. American Express's core business was still strong. People still used their traveler's checks. Restaurants still accepted their credit cards. The salad oil scandal hadn't touched those operations. The stock had crashed from fear, not from fundamental failure. Buffett started buying shares at $35. He visited restaurants and watched people pay with American Express cards. Nobody cared about some scandal in New Jersey. They cared that the card worked. He bought more shares. Eventually, he invested $13 million in American Express. It became one of his greatest investments ever. The stock recovered fully within 3 years. Buffett made a fortune from Tino de Angelis's fraud. But American Express learned brutal lesson. They completely overhauled their warehouse inspection procedures. No more measuring from the top only. They installed electronic sensors in commodity tanks. They required physical samples from multiple levels. They hired independent auditors to verify everything. The entire commodities industry followed suit. New federal regulations emerged from the scandal. The Warehouse Receipts Act was strengthened dramatically. Banks could no longer accept warehouse receipts without independent verification. The Commodity Exchange Authority gained new enforcement power. Cross-checking between lenders became mandatory. The Chicago futures markets implemented stricter collateral requirements. De Angelis went to trial in 1965. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in federal prison. He served only 5 years. Released in 1972, he died quietly in 2009. His legacy wasn't the mansions or the millions. It was the structural changes he forced upon American finance. Today, commodity warehouses operate under constant surveillance. Multiple inspectors verify every shipment from multiple angles. Technology monitors tank levels continuously. Banks share information about collateral in real time. The system de Angelis exploited no longer exists. But his con exposed a fundamental truth about markets. They run on trust. And trust can be manufactured. For years, de Angelis manufactured trust with seawater and paperwork. He proved that verification systems only work if someone actually verifies. American Express had vouched for oil without looking. Banks had lent money without checking. Regulators had approved contracts without auditing. Everyone had trusted the process. Nobody had trusted their own eyes. The salad oil scandal killed that complacency forever. Now, in commodities trading, everyone checks the bottom of the tank.